decirles que son muchos los avances que tenemos. Saludo a la ONU Mujeres. Creo que el trabajo de ONU Mujeres en el mundo, pero especialmente lo que conozco en América Latina, ha hecho un desafío, y lo que conozco en Guatemala, aún más porque soy parte de las iniciativas de ONU Mujeres en Guatemala, de la participación de mujeres, así que estoy muy contenta de estar con usted.
Thank you. I'd also like to recognize, before we go live, we have the honor of having with us today Her Royal Highness Crown Princess Mary of Denmark. She is an honorary advocate for the Leaders for the Generation Equality campaign, and it's wonderful to have you with us today. Thank you for joining us.
Well, it's a great pleasure to be here and part of this opening panel. I just wish I was in Mexico. I look forward to
in Mexico.
Yeah, or somewhere other than where we've been the last year. But no, I'm very much looking forward to what is an absolutely essential and important discussion, and very honored to be part of such an esteemed group of people to open this Generation Equality Forum.
Thank you. So we're starting in 45 seconds, it looks like.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm going to start the live stream from UN Women's YouTube channel. Could the VFairs team please enable the custom live streaming service on Zoom?
So in 30 seconds, I am introducing Amina Mohammed, yes? Everybody, I guess, all right. Hello, and welcome to our opening panel. It's about women's transformative leadership for gender equality. Thank you to our speakers and our audience. We have an opening statement for us from Amina Mohammed, who is the UN Deputy Secretary General.
De un siglo a otro.
Excellencies, sisters, it is my pleasure to address this opening panel of the Generation Equality Forum. Today we begin a global effort that will reinforce the power and voice of feminism, youth and grassroots movements. We will reaffirm the commitment of governments, the United Nations, philanthropists, and others to take bold and concrete actions to urgently implement the commitments of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action and the Sustainable Development Goals. It is my hope that we will move decisively from words to action and build an energized movement for gender equality. This is necessary so that progress for women and girls around the world, from our communities, families, and nations, becomes a reality. I thank the governments of Mexico and France for co-hosting this forum. UN Women is convening it, the civil society activists and young people who are co-leading this venture, and the countries and organizations joining this journey as Action Coalition leaders, commitment makers, and partners. As the world battles the COVID-19 pandemic and the economic crisis it has precipitated, we should be inspired by women leaders who have played critical roles to put countries on track for recovery. Yet, recent data shows only marginal increases across the decades in the number of women at the highest levels of political power. Only 25% of national parliamentarians are women. There are only 23 women heads of state and government. And so we have our work cut out for us. Women have a fundamental human right to equal participation. Those who make up 50% of the population should enjoy 50% of the power and responsibility. That means taking bold and ambitious measures, including targeted support and quotas to achieve this goal. In addition to equal representation, we must protect women's equal rights, address gender-based violence as the emergency it is, secure women's full economic empowerment, and give visibility and space to the intergenerational transition we see manifesting in the generation equality movement. I look forward to hearing from all of today's participants as they share their approaches and experiences and demonstrate the power of diverse, intergenerational, and intersectional women's leadership. The United Nations is strongly committed to this cause. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Secretary General. And now we are honored to have Sanna Marin, the Prime Minister of Finland, who will also give an opening statement.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to be speaking at this event. I would like to thank Mexico, France, and UN Women for organizing this Generation Equality Forum. I'm delighted to see the strong presence of young people here. You are the force for change in all societies. I also welcome the important role given to the private sector. Gender equality does not just happen. It requires political will and bold decisions. One example is the provision of high-quality daycare at a reasonable cost. In Finland, the education system promotes equal opportunities and inclusion for all. High-quality education is accessible and free. It sees strength in diversity. Gender equality is a key component of a successful democracy. Women are powerful agents of change for democracy and human rights. A society based on equality provides equal opportunities for everyone. However, Finland, like all countries, still has to work to improve gender equality. Today we need action more than ever before. The COVID-19 pandemic has affected women and girls around the world in a dramatic way. In many countries, there is a risk that girls will not return to school. Gender-based violence has increased. Female poverty is on the rise. In our recovery from the pandemic, building back better and building back equal will not be possible without the voices and leadership of women and girls. We must guarantee women's participation and leadership in society. Online and offline violence against women and girls, especially those in public and political life, cannot be tolerated. Online gender-based violence is a threat to democracy at large. Harmful gender stereotypes must be addressed. They limit the choices of women and girls, but also those of men and boys. Women and girls in vulnerable situations, such as those with disabilities and those belonging to ethnic minorities, face specific barriers. Ladies and gentlemen, gender equality is a long-standing priority for Finland's foreign policy. Finland is a proud co-leader of the Generation Equality Action Coalition on Technology and Innovation for Gender Equality. We want to see technology and innovation make the world a better place for women and girls. Finland is a candidate for the Human Rights Council for the 22-24 term. If elected, we will be a clear voice advocating for women's rights in the work of the Council. This forum is an excellent opportunity to hear diverse voices. Concrete actions are needed if we are to make change. We must stay united and work together against any attempt to question or weaken gender equality and women's and girls' rights, including sexual and reproductive health and rights. It is through bold, game-changing action and collaboration that we can achieve a truly gender-equal world. I would like to thank Mexico for hosting this event. I wish you all a successful meeting.
Wonderful. And as Prime Minister Marin's election shows us, a new generation is taking over. And this next panel that we are participating in includes both younger and older, more experienced leaders. It is truly going to be a conversation among these leaders who all are playing a part in the world that we want to create. I myself, by way of introduction, I run CBS News Digital, which is a global 24/7 streaming news service. So it's at the intersection of what technology brings us, which is the ability to participate together in a panel such as this and an event such as this via Zoom during a global pandemic. The wonders of technology are bringing us closer together and helping us to move society forward. I'm very proud of what our team has accomplished under the difficult circumstances of this past year, which is everybody being remote, including our anchors, yet continuing to cover these world-changing stories with a global impact. COVID-19, as we all know, but also what really was kicked off by the unfortunate death of George Floyd last summer, which sparked global protests over racial injustice. This is a story that we are continuing to cover, and in many ways represents how something in a medium-sized city in the United States can spark global important conversations about the reckoning with racism. And today we are having a conversation about what needs to be a global reckoning with gender inequality. Many of the leaders taking part in this panel today are, like myself, part of the UN Women Leaders for Generation Equality campaign. This is an intergenerational group of women leaders aiming to change the picture of a leader. I'm also a part of the Reykjavik Forum, which has produced an annual study called the Reykjavik Index, which has tracked for the past several years and will continue to track how men and women globally view women as leaders. And unfortunately, the results of the study are that both men and women still do not view women as leaders in the numbers that we would hope to see at this point in time after 25 years after Beijing. So with that, I'd like to kick off our panel. This is a dialogue and a conversation. I'm going to ask all of our speakers to keep their cameras on, unmute yourself when you talk, please, and then mute yourself when you're not talking. Also, keep it conversational so that this is really, as best we can, conversation as we would be having in person if we were all together in Mexico today. So I'd like to start with Her Royal Highness Crown Princess Mary of Denmark, who is an honorary advocate for the Leaders for Generation Equality campaign. Your Royal Highness, I have a 5-part question here. And just as a reminder, if all panelists can turn on their cameras, we would appreciate it. And so the question is, and I will ask you all 4 questions so that you can then address them. Why is diverse leadership essential? And why is it vital to ensure that women are equally represented in all decision-making spaces? Additionally, what conditions do countries need for women to take on equal leadership roles and participate in decision-making? Where are the main reasons for the slow progress that we're seeing, and where are the most crucial gender gaps? Thank you. I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Christy. And let me just start by saying that it's both a pleasure and an honor for me to be part of this opening panel together with such an esteemed group of people. I'd like to start by stating something that is obvious. Leadership is non-gender specific. A leader is a person with inherent or cultivated qualities that can influence and motivate a group of people to work towards achieving a common goal. Leaders need to represent the people they serve to best understand their wants and needs. Yet women, who make up roughly 50% of the global population, continue to be underrepresented in leadership and decision-making roles. There's no question that women as leaders and decision makers at all levels and across all sectors are critical to advancing gender justice and gender equality and to social, economic, and political progress. The most pressing issues in relation to greater gender parity in leadership varies depending on where you are in the world. And in a country like Denmark, where I'm from, where we have the legislation and institutional structures in place to ensure and support a diverse labour market, and where we pride ourselves on high female labour participation and educational attainment, there is still work to be done. We still see gaps and experience barriers, particularly when it comes to women in top leaders' positions, both in the public and the private sector. Across all sectors, communities, and societies, women have key contributions to make in leadership, but many barriers to women's leadership continue to persist. Now, we already know many of the barriers and the measures to overcome them. And as we have such limited time for the panel discussion, I'm going to focus on a single area: early intervention. Stereotypical notions of what men and women can do start manifesting themselves in early childhood. Women and girls' equal and substantive participation must be ensured from the earliest stages in life. And access to quality education and the transformation of gender norms and challenging stereotypes are absolutely essential. When girls are educated, they can make informed decisions and choices from a broader range of possibilities. And the knowledge and skills gained enable them to compete in the labour market and make decisions about their own lives, and ultimately pursue leadership positions and thereby contribute to their communities and countries as leaders. And education and the knowledge it brings are crucial to this end. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought about wide-reaching school closures around the globe. We have witnessed what we already knew, and that is that schools in many countries provide much more than just an education. They also provide protection and security. Recently, I spoke with Farida, a young girl from Uganda, about the consequences of school closures. She explained the simple fact of not wearing a school uniform makes girls potential marriage targets, and also makes them at a greater risk of sexual violence and assault. When girls are out of school, they are at a higher risk of child marriage and early pregnancy. And when they are young mothers and or married, they are less likely to continue in school and acquire the skills that give them chances in life. This is not right, and another lost opportunity to ensure the voices of young women are heard in decision-making, that their voices and perspectives we can ensure are heard in the necessary policies and changes that need to prevent this persistent disrespect for their human rights. Without an education and the protection provided by being in school, young girls are less likely to become female role models for other young girls and women. Studies show that early exposure to women leaders, as well as access to legislative and policy-making space, gives young women and girls invaluable experience, broadens their networks, and strengthens their opportunities to have their voices heard. This is a strong contributor to breaking down gender biases that keep barriers to achieving equal participation in place. So it's not only an education, it is also ensuring at a very early stage in a girl's life ensuring respect for her sexual and reproductive health and rights. These are prerequisites for girls' and women's empowerment and ability to protect the future they had hoped for. Early interventions can frame a young woman's choice of education and career, enabling her to claim her space in leadership and decision-making and be part of the transformative leadership we all will benefit from. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As we now have so much data on education for girls is such an important part of ending not only global poverty, but also shaping this future generation of leaders. So next I'd like to turn to H.R.H, who is a human rights advocate and co-founder of Together We Build It. Now, it's kind of funny for me to say you're one of the youth representatives on this panel today, because the opposite of youth is older. We're all somewhere in between those two definitions. From your perspective, tell me about the importance of women's leadership and how we are normalizing women in leadership positions. Do we have Hajer?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, great. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. And thank you very much for UN Women for inviting me. I think when we discuss women's participation in decision-making processes, be it in politics, be it in the private sector, being it at the household as well, it is important to always emphasize that women's participation is a right. It's not something that it's giving to us. It's not something extra. It is our right as women and young women to participate in every decision-making process that affects our daily life at whatever level it is. When we look at where we are today when it comes to women's participation in decision-making processes, maybe one important thing to highlight is that the fact that women are not equally participating, it doesn't say less about us as women and young women. In fact, it says less about the decision-making processes themselves, in the sense that since Beijing until now, these decision-making processes has not changed significantly for better. And one important thing also to highlight is that perhaps there is a huge misconception in many parts of the world that these decision-making processes are merit-based. That the selection to be part of these decision-making processes are solely merit-based. And this excludes one of the reasons for why women are not able to participate or are not equally participating as men, which is privilege. Being born within a specific group and being born as a specific gender who has a track record of participating and leading and designing decision-making processes means that these processes do not really reflect, and they do not frankly look like the communities they represent. And every time I'm having a conversation with whoever it is, regardless of gender, and I say, well, in order for us women and young women to be able to participate, we need to have enabling systematic mechanisms. It can be quotas, it can be reserved seats, it can be whatever mechanism it is, but we need to have enabling mechanisms in order to overcome the structural problem. Because the fact that we're not participating equally as men, that's not our fault, it's the fault of the system in itself. And you know, sometimes when you engage in such conversation and you put forward such argument, the opposite and the counter argument will say, well, the law does not prevent you from participating, so why don't you go and run for an office? Why don't you start your company? Why don't you just, as a woman or as a young woman, simply go and participate? And my response to that is that decision-making processes are like borders. If you don't hold a privileged passport, or if you don't belong to a privileged group, it doesn't mean you can easily enter. And telling women to, you know, just go and participate as if there is no structural obstacles is as telling me, a Libyan person, to just book a ticket and travel the world. I would need a visa to go almost everywhere and to be able to enter any country. I cannot just show up at the border control and say, well, I want to get in. And the same argument applies to women and young women's participation in decision-making processes. We still do need a visa to enter these processes. And this visa, it can be a quota, it can be a reserved seat, it can be whatever it is. But the fact is, we still need this visa to enter these processes.
Thank you, Hajer. I really like the metaphor that you used there about having a visa to enter these processes. I think we all on this panel can relate to what you're saying. I was just mentioning that 30 years ago, I had my first job out of college in which I edited photos of one of our panelists, Rigoberta Menchú, today. And if you had asked me at that time, if 30 years later, would I be struggling with the issue of gender equality, coming from a privileged position, as they say, well-educated, access to opportunities in the US, I would have said, no way, we have an equal playing field. But what I have learned in my 3 decades of working and experience is it's not an equal playing field. And one thing I want to do going forward is not try to tell a younger generation that it's equal and that if you just work hard, you'll get there, because I now know that that is not the truth. I've learned it myself, and I've also learned about the unconscious bias that comes from being in such a position of privilege. I would love to ask now of Beatriz Argimón, the Vice President of Uruguay, about your experience of leadership and whether what Hajer is saying resonates for you.
Bueno, primero, permítanme agradecer la invitación a formar parte de este momento tan importante que estamos llevando adelante todas juntas. Este encuentro en épocas tan difíciles de la sociedad global que nos encuentra unidas. Y esto tiene que ver con una reflexión y con algo que tú mencionabas, pero primero, por supuesto, y como corresponde, agradecer a los gobiernos que han organizado este evento y a ONU, que cumple un rol importantísimo en hacer visible el tema de la equidad de género desde hace mucho tiempo. Y agradezco este diálogo intergeneracional, porque cuando hablamos de Beijing, cuando hablamos de lo transitado como comunidades en este mundo diverso, hay algo que está claro, y es que todas somos conscientes de que se han verificado estudios por demás suficientes de Beijing a hoy, de lo que significa la discriminación en todos los ámbitos. Por lo tanto, yo no voy a hacer hincapié en los minutos que tengo en lo que para nosotras está claro. Hay claras señales de discriminación en nuestras sociedades que se van a agudizar sin lugar a dudas en el escenario de la pospandemia. Entonces, yo no me voy a detener en diagnósticos que ya sabemos, con los que contamos y que forman parte de estudios específicos que nos permiten visualizar lo que a nivel global, con distintas realidades, pero es notorio. ha habido avances, pero se ha demorado mucho, desde mi perspectiva, en obtener esa equidad de género que hace tiempo nosotros señalamos que es un tema no de lucha entre hombres y mujeres como muchos o muchas quieren poner en el escenario. Esto se trata, y desde ahí me parece que tenemos que estar juntas en estos tiempos, además de ser un tema de derechos, es un tema de calidad de las democracias. Si la mitad o la mirada de la mitad de una población mundial está fuera de donde se decide el futuro de nuestros países, este pasa a ser un tema de calidad de democracia. Y por lo tanto, cuando hablamos de los obstáculos que tenemos, cuando hablamos de ese cambio cultural por el que estamos transitando, no debemos perder de vista que han pasado ya muchos años en que hemos ido denunciando esta realidad y que en el mundo globalizado, donde todo es más rápido, las que ya tenemos años transitando en nuestro rol de esa apertura a mujeres líderes, debemos también dejar claro que debemos llevar adelante acciones concretas más rápido. Yo provengo de un sistema político muy sólido. Aquí en Uruguay las mujeres tuvimos, desde el punto de vista normativo, muy tempranamente nuestros derechos, pero sin embargo es verdad que tenemos los mismos obstáculos que hace muchos años íbamos señalando. ¿Que hay avances? Sí los ha habido, pero el siglo XXI debió habernos encontrado con una sociedad mucho más equitativa y encontrarnos a las mujeres trasladando nuestra mirada y proporcionando también acciones concretas con esa equidad que hace tiempo venimos pidiendo. Por lo tanto, yo resalto dos aspectos importantes. El hecho que hoy estos gobiernos y ONU nos junten, y por otro lado que sea un diálogo intergeneracional, porque ahí debemos dejar bien en claro nuestro compromiso. Las que ya hace tiempo que venimos batallando por la equidad de género en los lugares de decisión, tenemos que entender y hacer visible que ya ha pasado mucho tiempo y que se precisan acciones inmediatas. Esa toma de decisión con las miradas desde un punto de vista paritario no deben demorarse. Y mucho más teniendo en cuenta que las nuevas generaciones cada vez más están llamadas a cumplir más tempranamente que nuestras generaciones el asumir responsabilidades políticas y sociales en términos de conducción. No puede ser que después de todo lo trabajado, de todo lo transitado, cuando las normativas están y cuando se ha trasladado la necesidad de esa construcción codo a codo entre hombres y mujeres, tengamos que seguir haciendo eventos donde ya no tenemos que hablar más de diagnósticos, sino que tenemos que abrir paso a acciones concretas que nos deben encontrar a todas juntas. Y en ese sentido yo me propongo ponernos desde el lado del escenario de la pospandemia, donde tenemos que trabajar por darles insumos indispensables a las mujeres que en el mundo siguen siendo las que tienen a su cargo los cuidados, como ha quedado visto notoriamente en estos tiempos. Ha quedado claro que la pobreza tiene cara de mujer y de niños. Después de tanto haber transitado de Beijing acá, hay diagnósticos que se repiten y no hay más tiempo. una sociedad donde nos encuentra trabajando codo a codo, aportando al Producto Bruto Interno de nuestros países, habiéndonos formado, habiendo, por supuesto, teniendo que llegar a tal punto donde muchas de las mujeres más jóvenes que quieren seguir avanzando en su trayectoria, ya sea laboral, profesional o política, la sociedad y el sistema las pone en un momento de sus vidas en la coyuntura de tener que planificar su maternidad, porque esto puede ser visto hasta como un obstáculo. Es decir, las sociedades llegan a las mujeres que están comprometidas en el avance profesional, político, social, a condicionarlas muchas veces en el momento de ese cruce de caminos de tener que definir lo que yo denomino un auténtico proceso de penalización de su maternidad. Entonces, las mujeres ya no tenemos más nada que probar. Las mujeres tenemos que avanzar decididamente hacia los lugares que nos corresponden. Y en ese sentido, el escenario post-pandemia nos está convocando, sin lugar a dudas, a que esa carga honoraria que tenemos en el quehacer cotidiano que implica los cuidados que llevamos adelante en forma gratuita, esa necesidad de independencia económica que debemos, sin lugar a dudas, transitar como forma de lograr esa equidad de derechos, es una acción que debemos tomar fundamentalmente las mujeres que llegamos a los lugares de decisión. Yo además considero que hay actores políticos que entienden que este es un proceso natural. Yo creo que ha pasado ya mucho tiempo donde ese proceso natural nos sigue encontrando, trasladando y compartiendo diagnósticos que siguen hablando de inequidades. Por lo tanto, yo propongo que de este intercambio de mujeres que admiro, que sé de su trayectoria y que sé cuánto han aportado con su mirada de género en las decisiones a nivel de liderazgos políticos y sociales, hagamos una alianza estratégica donde de una vez por todas se pase a una acción decidida. El escenario post-pandemia nos va a encontrar precisamente con aumentos de pobreza. Y todas sabemos lo que significa cuando ese escenario pasa al aumento de pobreza, donde las mujeres nuevamente somos las más castigadas, y con las mujeres la realidad de nuestros niños y nuestras niñas. Por lo tanto, esa alianza estratégica puede empezar hoy. No podemos seguir demorando el escenario equitativo, y deben seguir llegando mujeres que tienen no el hecho de llegar por llegar, sino aquellas que tenemos incorporado la mirada de género y la equidad en el momento de la construcción de las políticas de nuestro país. Yo termino por acá agradeciendo fundamentalmente el estar juntas, el poder terminar este encuentro con ese compromiso de avanzar en forma decidida hacia esa equidad que hace mucho tiempo venimos solicitando. Yo estoy con ustedes y sé que ustedes están en la misma sintonía. Gracias de corazón.
It's such an honor to have you here, and I agree. We do need to work together on this. And as we know, poverty, as you said, poverty does have the face of women and children, and the COVID-19 pandemic has made that so much worse. As we globally come out of this, we need to work together to change this. So I'd love to get the perspective now of Helen Clark, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, who also was one of the highest level women in the UN for a long time. Prime Minister, we're seeing research on women in leadership being targets of violence. What is your view of this reality for women leaders? And sorry, Helen, one thing before you speak. If every speaker can write your name in your Zoom profile by clicking on the 3 dots, that way our audience will be able to see who you are we have more than 1,000 people who have joined through the Generation Equality Forum, and many more who also have joined us on YouTube. So I know we had a little bit of a late start on YouTube. Thank you to our YouTube audience for joining us. And what an incredible turnout we have for this panel. So Helen, former Prime Minister of New Zealand, I guess, yes, we're all women leaders, but we're also just people. So can you talk about women in leadership being the targets of violence, both from your experience as Prime Minister and also from your high level that you reached in the UN organization?
Well, firstly, I think we should be concerned about what this Reykjavik Global Index is telling us about perceptions of women leadership. It's done now across the G20 countries, and it's showing, still quite a remarkable degree of resistance to accepting women as leaders, even in countries like Germany, which have had very talented women's leadership for such a long time. I mean, the proportion of people in Germany surveyed who say they're comfortable with having a woman as head of government is 41%. For goodness sake, Angela Merkel has been a leader for years, and only 41% are comfortable with this. I mean, this is quite extraordinary. So it does say that there are really some quite deep stereotypes here that women are battling when they're coming into the system. But what we can't accept is that those leadership chairs, those decision-making chairs, don't have our name on them. I think it's really critical that we never suffer from imposter syndrome, asking, should we be there? Yes, we should be there. We should be there because it's right and because our perspectives are absolutely essential to quality decision-making and ensuring that whole communities are represented and not just the roughly half that is male. I think when you look at how women leaders have handled COVID, you see that the characteristics so often associated with women's leadership really there, showing what we can do. The women leaders who've shown the empathy, who've communicated well, who haven't had the large overweening egos that haven't been prepared to listen to science, listen to advice, weigh up evidence, make decisions. I mean, there's just been some incredible stars among the women's leaders, and I hope we'll get people to look at women leaders in a new light. Look, electoral systems matter in getting women into leadership. The sort of classic first past the post system as still pertains in the United Kingdom, United States, Canada is not so conducive to women breaking through. My own country got a really quite remarkable breakthrough with women's representation when it moved from that old Westminster UK system to proportional representation. We're now up to 48.5% of our parliament is female without quotas. But let's come to quotas. If your country's not making progress fast, go to quotas. They do work, and many countries have tried them and are getting results from them. For women, I think entry into decision making is often thwarted by lack of access to resources. And if political parties are serious about backing women in leadership, they're going to have to make sure that those women's campaigns are properly funded. They also need to support women against the threats of political violence when they run, because women can be more susceptible to that. And what more graphic demonstration could there be than the tragic assassination of Benazir Bhutto in Pakistan all those years ago. So yes, there are obstacles, there are stereotypes, there is stigma. But if we just say, well, that's the way it is and we're not going to try, that's not good enough either. We have to build the alliances and the networks of women and men who will back women to work their way into these systems and change them. Not just adapt to these systems the way they are, but go in there to change and make it easier for future generations to come through. I think that would be my message.
Thank you so much. I think the issue of quotas is really interesting. In some ways, in English, the word quota almost has a stigma attached to it. it would be nice if there was another. I liked how our earlier speaker called it reserved seats. Hajer Sharief said reserved seats, which I find to be perhaps maybe something that doesn't create the Can you hear me? Okay, thank goodness. All right. So as I was saying, it's a wonderful world of technology that we live in today. So again, we're going to now to Inés Yabar, who's a sustainability activist. I'm going to ask you to speak a little bit about how we achieve a feminist agenda of leadership, go beyond the focus on women's leadership, and ensure a diverse, inclusive, and intersectional forms of leadership for all members of society. This is so important. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question, and thank you for having me today. I'm really humbled to be with so many inspiring women that I look up to. And at just 25 years of age, I have to pinch myself and think, am I really in this space and discussing women who have done so much already? And I hope to achieve as much as well. I am a sustainability activist, but that goes as well with sustainability as an ecology, but sustainable cities includes also working in poverty. And I work with Techo, which is an organization in Latin America helping people overcome poverty. And 76% of the leaders in the communities we work with are women. And I think that is very powerful to know that women in shanty towns are the ones leading, and they're the ones bringing ahead their communities and helping them overcome poverty. And this is something that goes across, as you were saying, intersectionality. It goes across all areas of society. And I think there is a problem if women aren't being recognized for their leadership at any level. And they're just being sometimes applauded, sometimes their voices are amplified, but they don't really have the actual resources. They can't generate that momentum that we're asking for to be part of that decision-making space and have leadership roles at higher level. I was at a webinar a couple of weeks ago, and they were mentioning how only 13 countries have had more than one woman lead, and only 2 of them had 3 women lead. So where's the issue where we come from women leading in their communities on the ground, and then they can't go further? What's happening when they reach higher stages? I am from Peru, and 30% of the parliament seats are held by women, and we have elections in 2 weeks. And I think something really important is to see that it's our role as well to elect those women into spaces. Unfortunately, only 4 women out of 33 candidates, or 4 of the candidates are women out of 33, but they are there. And I think it's our role as well to recognize that they are in these spaces. They are everywhere. Women, as we've been saying from the beginning, are 50% of humanity. So we are in every sector, we are everywhere, and we are working and we are doing things. And it's up to us to recognize those women, to see them, to understand what the issues are that we have in whatever sector of society we work in. I'm also working with a lot of young people in different countries that recognize this gender issue and the gender gaps in their communities. Recently, I was working with many young people from Kenya who were just saying how child marriage and period poverty and lack of access to education were the ones that weren't allowing them to reach their full potential. So what can we do to help them? And I'm really grateful to be inspired by a lot of young activists from around the world, including my friend H.R.H, who just launched a book called Make It Happen. And she managed to make in the UK period poverty something kind of the past, and there's still lots of work to do, but now anyone in any school can access period products for free. And so I think there's a lot that we can do as young people, there's a lot that we can do as women.